So now that we know that this file exists, now we can go ahead and open it. We can go ahead and create a file stream. File stream, I'm just going to name it fs is equal to file.open, and then I give it the file name. And so notice it needs the path to it, which I'm giving as a file name here, and then it needs a file name mode. Basically, that mode is how are you going to open this file? What are you going to be doing with this file? Well, in this case, we want to open that file, and this is open for reading. If we want to write out to the file, then we would use create new or create or append, or we could do open or create. This would be kind of both, specifies that the opening should open the file if it exists, otherwise a new file should be created. So this one is if you don't want to check to see if the file exists and then exit, you could say open or create, and then it will always succeed. It will either open the file or it will create it if it does not exist. So we just want to do file mode.open. Now this file mode.open, if you actually look on the documentation, this is going to be effectively an integer. It's an enumerated type, and so file mode.open, so file mode is the enumeration, open is one of the options in there, and it has a value of 3. So technically you could put a 3 here as well, but it's a little bit more clear to say file mode.open. So let's go ahead and open that file. And now that we have this file open and we have a file stream to it, we can go ahead and do some stuff. So let's go ahead and read in the bytes. So bytes, and this will be a byte array. Bytes, oops, sorry, this is supposed to be byte, and then these are going to be bytes which are going into the array, equals new byte. We need to give it a size. Now, what is the size of the file? We could go and look at the file. We can believe we can get the properties. Oh, this isn't actually going to show us the size there. We could look under Windows and see what the size is, but there is an easier way. Since we have a file stream there, we can say fs dot, and there's a number of properties that we have, and one of those is length. And length is get the length in bytes of the stream. And since we are storing it into a byte array, that's going to be the number of characters we need. And we can go ahead and add in some extra padding as well, just in case we need an extra 10 bytes or something like that. It's not uncommon to make your array, your buffer array that you read it into, to be slightly bigger than what you're actually reading in, because, I mean, sometimes weird things can happen. And so now that we have that array, we can say long num bytes to read is equal to going to just be the length. So this actually returns a long value. That's why it has to be a long. And that is going to be just the number of bytes that we're going to be reading. And then we'll just create a num bytes read is equal to 0. And so this is going to be our counter to say how many bytes we have read in. This is going to be the number of bytes to read. This is going to be the number of bytes we have read. Put a new line there. All right, so now we just need to do something. So do, and now for each iteration of this, we need to read in some number of bytes. fs dot, and there is this read. There's also this end read. Waits for the pending asynchronous read operation to complete. We'll talk about asynchronous later, but this is a way that you can make your process asynchronous so it can do multiple things at once. This read byte reads just a single byte. This read, on the other hand, reads a sequence of bytes from the current file stream and advances its position within the file stream by the number of bytes read. So what we want to do is we want to read in, say, 10 bytes. Now there's two options. We can have a span, or we can have a buffer we're going to read it into, an offset, and then the number of bytes to read. And it will return as an int the number of bytes it successfully read. So our buffer that we are going to read it into is bytes. The offset is going to be number of bytes read. which is going to start out at 0, and then the number of bytes we'll read, I'm just going to go ahead and do 10. So what this is saying is we're going to store into our bytes array the offset, which is a number of bytes read, which is 0 right now, and we're going to read 10 bytes. After we read in 10 bytes, well, we just need to say number of bytes read plus equal 10, because we read in, actually, we don't want to do 10. We want to do the number of bytes we actually read, the whatever it restore or returns from there. And now we need to decrement the number of bytes to be read. And we want to decrement this n amount as well, because n will be however many we read. And now all we need to do is we need to do this while number of bytes to read is greater than 0. Because as long as there is still something to read, then we want to keep reading in 10 byte chunks. Now we could read it in more chunks, but I'm just choosing 10 for right now. So if we run this, we shouldn't get any error or anything, but our byte array is now populated. So let's go ahead and print that out. And so this is going to be system.text.encoding.utf8.getString, and then bytes. And this is just saying, okay, let's take a character array, or actually a bytes array, and we want to convert it over to a UTF-8, so human readable format. So this is printing it out to the screen. So now if we run this, we should get the contents of the file printed out. So we read in the bytes, and we read these into our bytes array up there, and this loop is what actually reads it in, and then all we're doing is just printing it out afterwards.